A week after I lost my job, I signed a $25 million contract and came home to tell my wife. But when I opened the door, I saw my wife kissing the same boss who fired me on our bed. My wife's parents said, I deserved it. Days later, my wife and her new lover mocked me at a party. But when they saw who stood next to me, her lover screamed, "Oh my God, it's, you know what they say about life kicking you when you're down." Well, apparently life didn't get the memo that I was already sprawled out on the pavement eating dirt like it was my last meal. My name's Adrian Blake, and at the ripe old age of 34, I've officially mastered the art of having the universe laugh directly in my face. Picture this. Exactly 7 days ago, I was sitting in Charles Mercer's corner office at Harrison Tech, watching this smug bastard fire me like I was some intern who'd been caught stealing post-it notes. The guy had the audacity to lean back in his leather chair. The one that probably cost more than my monthly rant, and deliver his little speech about budget cuts and streamlining operations. Yeah, right. More like streamlining me right out the door because my logistics AI was making his outdated systems look like they belonged in a museum next to rotary phones and fax machines. Nothing personal, Adrian, he'd said, not even bothering to look up from his computer screen. Nothing personal. Dude had been gunning for me ever since I pitched the idea that could revolutionize their entire supply chain management. But hey, what did I know? I was just the guy who'd been busting my ass for 3 years, working weekends, skipping family dinners, practically living at that office like some kind of corporate hermit crab. So there I was, walking out of Harrison Tech with my sad little cardboard box of personal belongings. You know, the classic fired employee starter pack, a coffee mug, some pins that probably didn't work, and a plant that was already half dead from the fluorescent light torture chamber they called an office. Real dignified stuff. But here's where life decided to play its favorite game. Let's mess with Adrian's head until he doesn't know whether to laugh or cry. Because exactly 1 week after getting the boot, I'm standing in the marble-floored lobby of Meatfair Corporation shaking hands with Julian Cross himself. Yeah, that Julian Cross, the CEO who's basically the healthcare industry's golden boy and signing a contract that made my bank account do a happy dance. $25 million. Let that sink in for a hot minute. $25 million freaking dollars for the same logistics AI that Charles had dismissed like yesterday's leftover pizza. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a butter knife and serve it at a dinner party. Harrison Tech, the company that had basically told me to take a long walk off a short pier, was now desperate to get their grubby little hands on my design. Not directly, of course, because that would require admitting they'd made a colossal mistake. Instead, they were trying to work through Meatfair, hoping to license my tech through a backdoor deal. Julian Cross, bless his capitalist heart, saw right through their Adrian, he'd said, adjusting his $5,000 suit like it was no big deal. What you've created isn't just innovative, it's revolutionary. We don't need Harrison Tech's permission to change the world. And just like that, I went from unemployed loser to multimillionaire overnight. The American dream, baby. Except nobody mentions that sometimes it feels more like a fever dream where you're not sure if you're winning or losing your mind. Walking home from that meeting, I had the contract tucked safely in my messenger bag like it was nuclear launch codes. My head was spinning with all the ways I was going to tell Melissa the news. My wife, God, even thinking about her made my chest tight with anticipation, was going to flip her lid in the best possible way. I could already picture her face lighting up, maybe doing that little squeal thing she used to do when we first started dating. Hell, maybe we'd finally be able to afford that house in Cherry Creek she'd been eyeing. The one with the fancy kitchen and the walk-in closets bigger than most people's bedrooms. I was rehearsing my big reveal speech, you know, practicing how I'd casually drop the news like it was no big deal. Oh, by the way, honey, remember how I got fired last week? Well, funny story. I was even thinking about stopping to grab some champagne. Maybe those expensive strawberries she likes really make it a celebration to remember. But life, that magnificent bastard, had other plans. I pushed open our bedroom door, ready to share the best news of our marriage, and instead got a front row seat to the worst betrayal of my life. There was my wife, my supposedly loving, devoted wife, lip-locked with Charles freaking Mercer on our bed, the bed I'd been sleeping in for 3 years, the one with the stupid expensive sheets she'd insisted we needed from that boutique downtown. They froze like deer in headlights, but not in the way you'd expect. There was no scrambling, no panicked explanations, no desperate attempts to cover up. They just stopped like they'd been caught doing something mildly inconvenient. Not destroying my entire world. The contract folders slipped from my hands. Papers scattering across our hardwood floor like confetti at the world's worst party. Legal documents worth $25 million mixed with the dust bunnies under our dresser. And all I could do was stand there like an idiot trying to process what I was seeing. Melissa's eyes met mine. And here's the kicker. She didn't look guilty. She didn't look ashamed or sorry or even remotely embarrassed. She looked annoyed, like I'd interrupted her favorite TV show or walked in on her during an important phone call. Her perfectly styled blonde hair wasn't even messed up, which somehow made the whole thing even more insulting. Charles, that smug piece of garbage, actually had the balls to smirk at me. This guy, the same guy who fired me a week ago, who'd sat behind his big important desk and basically told me I was worthless, was now sprawled across my bed like he owned the place. "You should have seen this coming," he said, his voice dripping with that same condescending tone he'd used when he'd canned me. Like this was all part of some master plan I'd been too stupid to figure out. And you know what the really twisted part was? Standing there in my own bedroom, watching my wife and my former boss destroy my life in stereo. All I could think about was that contract on the floor. $25 million worth of vindication scattered like broken dreams across the carpet. The universe's timing was either perfect or perfectly cruel. I couldn't decide which. You ever have one of those days where you wake up thinking things can't possibly get worse and then life says, "Hold my beer and watch this"? Yeah. Well, welcome to my Tuesday morning, courtesy of the Green Family Circus. The call came at exactly 8:47 a.m. I know because I was staring at my phone like it might magically transport me to a different dimension where my wife wasn't banging my ex-boss. Harold Green's voice boomed through the speaker with all the warmth of a tax on it. "Adrian, you need to come to the house now. We need to discuss this situation." Situation. That's what we were calling it. Now, not adultery, not betrayal, not the complete implosion of my marriage, just a situation like a minor plumbing issue or a parking ticket. The Green family had always been masters at repackaging reality into something more palatable for their delicate sensibilities. So, there I was, driving my beat-up Honda Civic through the gates of their estate in Cherry Hills Village, feeling like I was entering enemy territory. And let me tell you, the Green Mansion was the kind of place that screamed, "We have more money than God, and we want everyone to know it." 8 bedrooms, 12 bathrooms, and enough marble to make a Roman emperor jealous. The driveway alone was longer than most people's entire street, lined with perfectly manicured hedges that probably cost more to maintain than my annual salary at Harrison Tech. I parked between Harold's Bentley and Patricia's Mercedes. My Honda looking like a rusty paperclip next to a couple of Rolex watches. Real subtle message there, folks. Might as well have put up a neon sign that said, "You don't belong here, peasant." The front door was one of those massive oak monstrosities that required both hands and a personal trainer to open properly. Before I could even knock, it swung open to reveal Maria, their housekeeper, who gave me a look that was equal parts pity. "And you poor bastard." She'd always been nice to me, probably because she recognized a fellow member of the People Who Work for a Living club. "They're in the library," she whispered like she was directing me to a funeral, which, let's be honest, might not have been far off. The library, of course, because nothing says we're about to destroy your life like doing it surrounded by leather-bound books that nobody's actually read. Harold Green collected first editions the way some people collect baseball cards, except his hobby came with a lot more pretension and a lot less fun. I found them exactly where you'd expect. Harold nursing a tumbler of bourbon at 10 o'clock in the morning like some kind of Southern gentleman cosplayer, and Patricia clicking her pearl necklace like worry beads. She was wearing one of those outfits that screamed, "I shop at stores that don't have price tags." All cream-colored fabrics and shoes that probably cost more than most people's rent. "Adrian," Harold said without getting up, gesturing to a chair across from them like I was applying for a job. "Sit, not please sit or have a seat. Just sit." Like I was a dog who'd learned a new trick. Real classy. "Harold, your country club etiquette lessons really paid off." I stayed standing, mostly because I knew it would annoy them, but also because sitting felt too much like surrendering. "Let me guess," I said, crossing my arms. "You call me here to explain why your daughter is screwing my boss in my bed. This should be good." Patricia's face twisted like she'd just bitten into a lemon wrapped in disappointment. "How dare you speak about Melissa that way? She's our daughter, and she deserves better than what you've given her." "Better than what I've given her." I laughed and it came out sharper than I intended. "You mean like love, respect, and 3 years of my life? Or are we talking about the $25 million contract I just signed? Because I'm pretty sure that counts as giving her something." Harold's bourbon glass paused halfway to his lips. "What contract?" "Oh, that was rich. They didn't even know about Meat Fear yet." Melissa hadn't bothered to mention that little detail during her family briefing. Probably too busy planning her next romantic renvous with Charles to fill in the parentals on my sudden career resurrection. "The one that makes me worth more than Charles Mercer's entire annual salary," I said, watching their faces like I was studying a master class in shock and confusion. Funny how timing works, isn't it? But Patricia, bless her cold, calculating heart, recovered faster than a politician during a scandal. She waved her manicured hand like she was swatting away an annoying fly. Money doesn't make you a man, Adrian. You were never good enough for Melissa. Charles is a real man, a provider. He has breeding class, a future breeding. She actually said breeding like we were talking about rache horses instead of human beings. I'd always known Patricia was a snob, but hearing her talk about her son-in-law like I was some kind of genetic mistake really drove the point home. A provider? I shot back. The guy who fired me last week because he was threatened by my success. That's your idea of a provider? A man who steals other people's wives because he can't get his own life together? Harold slammed his glass down hard enough to make the bourbon slush. You watch your tone, boy. You're in our house, boy. I was 34 years old, had just signed a multi-million-dollar contract, and this fossil was calling me boy. The disrespect was so thick you could spread it on toast and serve it at their next charity luncheon. You're right, I said, my voice getting colder by the second. I am in your house. The house where you raised a daughter who thinks marriage vows are more like suggestions. The house where you taught her that loyalty is optional and integrity is for poor people. That's when I heard the clicking of heels on marble. And Melissa appeared in the doorway like she was making a grand entrance at a debutante ball. But she wasn't alone. Oh no, that would have been too simple. Charles was right behind her, his hand resting on the small of her back like he owned her. The sight of them together hit me like a punch to the gut all over again. Melissa was wearing a dress I'd never seen before. Something expensive and clingy that screamed, I'm celebrating my freedom from my loser husband. Her hair was perfect, her makeup flawless, and she was smiling like she'd just won the lottery. Charles looked equally smug, dressed in one of those casual but expensive outfits that probably cost more than my car. His hand on Melissa's back wasn't just possessive. It was a declaration of war. A visual middle finger aimed directly at me. Adrian, Melissa said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. I didn't expect to see you here. Yeah, well, your parents thought we should have a little chat about your recent career change. Her eyes narrowed and for a split second, I saw a flash of the real Melissa. The one who'd been planning this betrayal long before yesterday. My what? Your new job as Charles's side piece. Although, I guess it's more of a promotion now since you've graduated from wife to mistress to what exactly? Trophy girlfriend. The room went dead silent. Patricia gasped like I just committed murder in church. Harold's face turned a shade of red that probably wasn't medically advisable. But Charles just smiled wider. Congratulations, Adrian, he said, his voice smooth as snake oil. You finally figured it out. Only took you 3 years. And that's when I realized the truth that hurt worse than anything else. They'd all been in on it. Every single one of them. This wasn't some spontaneous affair or moment of weakness. This was a coordinated campaign to humiliate me. And I'd been too stupid to see it coming. I looked around that library at all those expensive books and antique furniture and family portraits of people who'd never worked a day in their lives. And I made myself a promise. I wasn't going to let them win. Not today, not ever. You know what, I said, heading for the door. You all deserve each other. That night, I packed a bag and left for a shabby rental on the edge of Denver. The place had peeling wallpaper and a kitchen that belonged in a horror movie, but it was mine. And as I stared at those cracked walls, I swore to myself, I would not let them win. You know what's funny about rock bottom? It's got great acoustics. Every single sound echoes back at you with crystal clear precision, including the voice in your head screaming, what the hell are you going to do now, genius? I've been wallowing in my crappy rental apartment for exactly 48 hours, surviving on a steady diet of takeout Chinese food and self-pity when my phone bust. The caller ID made me do a double take. Sophia Daniels. Now, there was a name I hadn't seen in a while, and honestly, probably the only person on planet Earth I actually wanted to talk to right now. Sophia and I went way back. College buddies who'd bonded over late-night coding sessions and a mutual hatred of pretentious computer science professors who thought they were God's gift to Silicon Valley. She was one of those rare people who could debug code and demolish your ego with equal efficiency, all while making you laugh until your sides hurt. If there was anyone who could handle the absolute dumpster fire my life had become, it was Sophia. Adrian Blake, she said the moment I picked up, you sound like hot garbage warmed over. Please tell me you're not sitting in your underwear eating cereal for dinner. Close, I admitted, looking down at my pajama pants and the container of lo mein that had become my best friend. It's Chinese food and I'm wearing pants. Barely. Jesus Christ, you really are a mess. I could practically hear her rolling her eyes through the phone. Get dressed. I'm coming over and we're going to figure this out like adults. Sophia, I don't really feel like, did I stutter? I said, get dressed. And for the love of all that's holy, please tell me you've showered in the last 24 hours. The truth was, I hadn't. But Sophia had this way of making you want to be better, even when you felt like absolute garbage. By the time she knocked on my door an hour later, I'd managed to locate a clean shirt and run a comb through my hair, which was basically the equivalent of climbing Mount Everest in my current state. She walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee from that fancy place downtown and took one look around my temporary disaster zone. Well, she said, stepping over a pile of dirty laundry. I've seen worse. Remember junior year when Tommy Morrison had that nervous breakdown during finals? His place looked like a bomb went off in a pizza factory. Thanks for the pep talk, I muttered, accepting the coffee like it was liquid salvation. Sophia plopped down on my second-hand couch, which groaned in protest and fixed me with that look she used to give our professors when they said something particularly stupid. Okay, spill it. And I want the whole story, not the sanitized version you probably told your mom. So, I told her everything. The firing, the contract, walking in on Melissa and Charles, the humiliation parade at the Green family mansion, all of it. Sophia listened without interrupting, which was unusual for her, occasionally raising an eyebrow or making those little H sounds that meant she was filing away information for later use. When I finished, she leaned back and crossed her arms, a gesture I remembered from college that usually preceded her saying something that would either change your life or destroy your self-esteem. Sometimes both. You know what your problem is, Adrian? She said, taking a sip of her coffee like she was about to deliver the wisdom of the ages. You're acting like a victim when you should be acting like a predator. What the hell is that supposed to mean? It means they've underestimated you, and that's their first mistake. Her eyes lit up with that dangerous gleam I remembered from when she'd figured out how to hack the campus vending machines. These people, Melissa, Charles, her stuck-up parents, they all think you're some pathetic loser who's going to crawl into a hole and disappear. They have no idea what you're actually capable of. Capable of what? My wife is screwing my ex-boss. Her parents think I'm pawn scum, and I'm living in a place that makes a college dorm look. What exactly am I supposed to be capable of? Sophia sat down her coffee and leaned forward, her voice getting that intensity it used to have when she was explaining a particularly elegant piece of code. You just signed a $25 million contract, idiot. You brilliant. You got resources now. You've got leverage. And most importantly, you've got me. You damn right me. Do you have any idea what I've been doing since graduation? I've been building a consulting firm that specializes in corporate espionage. The legal kind mostly. I know how to dig up dirt, follow money trails, and find the skeletons that rich people think they've buried deep enough to stay hidden. I stared at her, wondering if the stress had finally made me hallucinate. You're a corporate spy. I prefer a forensic business analyst, but yeah, basically. She grinned like a shark who just spotted a wounded seal. And trust me when I say that Charles Mercer and his merry band of backstabbers have left more breadcrumbs than Hansel and Gretel. What kind of breadcrumbs? The kind that lead to fraud charges if we're lucky. But first, we need to get you some real legal representation. Someone who knows how to play hardball with these country club. That's when she pulled out her phone and started scrolling through her contacts. I know just the guy, Victor Hale. Coldest son of A in Denver's legal scene. He's the kind of lawyer who eats rich peoples for breakfast and asks for seconds. Sophia, I can't afford some hotshot attorney. I've got the contract money, but it's not like I can just relax, drama queen. Victor's not expensive. He's an investment. And trust me, after he's done with Charles and company, they'll be paying for his services whether they want to or not. She was already dialing, and I watched in fascination as she shifted into what I could only describe as professional badass mode. Her posture straightened, her voice became crisp and authoritative, and suddenly she sounded like someone who could negotiate peace treaties or hostile takeovers with equal efficiency. Victor, it's Sophia Daniels. I've got a situation that's right up your alley. Corporate fraud, adultery, conspiracy, and a bunch of rich idiots who think they're untouchable. Yeah, it's going to be fun. She scheduled a meeting for the next day and hung up with a satisfied smile. There. Phase 1 complete. Phase 1 of what exactly? Phase 1 of making sure Charles Mercer and your cheating wife regret the day they decided to screw with Adrian Blake. She stood up and stretched, looking around my pathetic apartment one more time. You know what? This place is actually perfect. Perfect for what? Filming a documentary about rock bottom. Perfect for flying under the radar while we build your case. They think you're broken and defeated, hiding in some dump on the wrong side of town. Meanwhile, you're going to be assembling a legal strike team that'll hit them like a freight train. I felt something I hadn't experienced in days. Hope. Not the delusional everything will work out fine kind of hope, but the cold, calculated kind that comes with having a plan. A plan that involved making the people who'd betrayed me pay for every single minute of humiliation they'd put me through. Sophia, I said, and for the first time since walking in on Melissa and Charles, I actually smiled. I think I'm starting to like this plan. Good, she said, heading for the door because tomorrow we start playing for keeps. And Adrian, these people have no idea what they've unleashed. As I watched her leave, I realized that maybe rock bottom wasn't the end of my story. Maybe it was just the foundation I needed to build something bigger, stronger, and infinitely more dangerous than anything Charles Mercer or the Green family could imagine. You ever get one of those invitations that's clearly designed to be a public execution disguised as a social gathering? Yeah. Well, that's exactly what landed in my mailbox 3 days after my strategy session with Sophia. Cream-colored card stock, gold-embossed lettering, the whole 9 yards of "we have more money than taste" presentation. You are cordially invited to celebrate the engagement of Melissa Green Blake and Charles Mercer. It read like they were announcing the merger of 2 Fortune 500 companies instead of the formalization of an affair. The date was set for Saturday night at the Green family mansion and the dress code was listed as cocktail attire. Translation: come watch us humiliate Adrian in public while wearing your finest threads. The smart move would have been to toss that invitation in the trash and spend the evening doing literally anything else. Reorganizing my sock drawer, watching paint dry, performing amateur dentistry on myself. But apparently, common sense had taken a vacation somewhere around the time I discovered my wife playing tonsil hockey with my ex-boss. So, there I was, Saturday night at 8 o'clock, standing in front of the Green family gates in my best suit, which, let's be honest, looked like thrift store clearance compared to what everyone else would be wearing. My Honda Civic coughed and wheezed as I pulled up to the valet station where some kid in a bow tie looked at my car like I just handed him a bag of radioactive garbage. "Will you be staying long, sir?" he asked, clearly hoping the answer was just long enough to drop something off and leave immediately. "Long enough," I said, pocketing my keys and walking toward the mansion like I owned the place. Fake confidence was my new best friend, and tonight we were going to be inseparable. The front lawn had been transformed into something that looked like a movie set for rich people having fun, the motion picture. String lights hung from every tree. Ice sculptures that probably cost more than my monthly rent dotted the landscape, and servers in crisp white uniforms circulated with champagne that I'm pretty sure cost more per bottle than most people's car payments. I walked through the front door and immediately felt like I'd stepped into the lion's den wearing a meat suit. The main foyer was packed with Denver's elite doctors, lawyers, business owners, and other assorted members of the I Wipe My Ass with $100 Bills Club. They were all laughing and chatting and pretending to care about each other's kids' college applications, but I could feel their eyes on me the moment I walked in. The whispers started almost immediately. I caught fragments of conversation as I made my way through the crowd. "Isn't that the husband? Poor bastard actually showed up. I heard he got fired. Melissa really upgraded. Yeah, real classy bunch." These people had turned gossip into an art form, and tonight I was their featured exhibition. I grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing server. Might as well drink their expensive booze while they talked about me, and positioned myself near the back of the room where I could watch the show without being the main attraction. The champagne tasted like liquid gold, which made sense since it probably cost about the same. That's when I spotted them. Melissa was holding court near the marble fireplace, wearing a dress that screamed, "I'm available and expensive." It was some kind of emerald green number that probably cost more than my car, and she was absolutely glowing with the kind of happiness that comes from publicly humiliating your soon-to-be ex-husband. Around her neck was a diamond necklace that caught the light every time she moved, sending little sparkles across the room like a disco ball made of pure arrogance. Charles was right beside her. Naturally, his arm wrapped around her waist like he was claiming territory. He was wearing one of those tuxedos that probably required a team of Italian tailor and a small loan to acquire. And he had that smug expression that made me want to introduce his face to my fist on a very personal level. The crowd around them was eating it up. These people loved a good scandal almost as much as they loved pretending to be morally superior to everyone else. Melissa was basking in the attention like a cat in a sunbeam, occasionally glancing around the room to make sure everyone was watching her grand performance. That's when she spotted me. Our eyes met across the crowded room, and for just a second, I saw something flicker across her face. Not guilt, Melissa didn't do guilt, but maybe surprised that I'd actually had the balls to show up. She leaned over and whispered something to Charles, who turned to look at me with that same condescending smirk he'd perfected during our years working together. Melissa straightened up and clinkied her champagne glass with a butter knife, the sound cutting through the chatter like a dinner bell. The room gradually fell silent, all eyes turning toward her like she was about to announce the cure for cancer. "Thank you all so much for being here tonight," she began, her voice carrying that fake sweetness she perfected during her sorority days. "Charles and I are so grateful to have all of our friends and family here to celebrate this exciting new chapter in our lives." New chapter? Like our 3-year marriage had been some kind of rough draft that she'd finally gotten around to editing. "I know some of you might be wondering about the timing," she continued, her eyes scanning the crowd before landing on me again. "But sometimes life has a way of showing you what you really deserve. Charles has shown me what it means to be with a real partner, someone who can provide, not just financially, but emotionally and intellectually as well." The crowd murmured their approval, and I felt my jaw clench so hard I thought my teeth might crack. She was really doing this. She was actually using our engagement party to take pot shots at me in front of half of Denver's high society. "To Charles," she said, raising her glass higher. "My future, my partner, my real success story." The crowd erupted in applause and raised glasses. Everyone drinking to the happy couple while I stood there feeling like I'd been sucker punched in front of a live studio audience. But Melissa wasn't done yet. Charles stepped forward, his arm tightening around Melissa's waist as he raised his own glass. "And to moving forward," he said, his voice carrying easily across the room, "to leaving behind the people who couldn't keep up, and to building something worthy of the future we deserve." Then he looked directly at me, and his smile turned absolutely predatory. "Adrian's just a man who couldn't keep up." The laughter that followed was like nails on a chalkboard. These people, these supposedly civilized, educated, refined members of society, were literally laughing at my expense while sipping champagne that cost more than most people's grocery budget. It was like being back in high school, except the bullies were designer clothes and drove cars that cost more than houses. I stood there alone, my fists clenched so tight in my pockets that I could feel my nails digging into my palms. The humiliation was complete, total, and absolutely intentional. They'd invited me here specifically for this moment, to watch me stand there helpless while they celebrated destroying my life. That's when I felt someone step up beside me, close enough that I could sense their presence without looking over. The entire room seemed to shift like the air pressure had suddenly changed. The laughter died away, replaced by a silence so complete you could have heard a pin drop on the marble floor. I turned slightly and saw a figure I recognized but couldn't quite believe was really there. The crowd's reaction confirmed it. People were staring, some with their mouths literally hanging open, others frantically whispering to their companions. Charles's face had gone from smug satisfaction to absolute horror in the span of about 3 seconds. His champagne glass was trembling in his hand, and when he tried to speak, his voice came out as a strangled croak. "Oh my God." He managed to stammer, his eyes wide with something that looked suspiciously like panic. "It's him. You know that moment in movies when the cavalry shows up just when the hero's about to get massacred? Yeah. Well, apparently that actually happens in real life. And let me tell you, it's even more satisfying than Hollywood makes it look." The man standing beside me was Julian Cross. And if you don't know that name, you've either been living under a rock or you don't pay attention to the healthcare industry. This guy was basically the Steve Jobs of medical technology, except instead of making overpriced phones, he built an empire that revolutionized how hospitals manage everything from patient care to supply chains. Forbes had him on their cover last year with the headline, "The Man Who Fixed Healthcare." And seeing him in person, I could understand why. Julian was one of those people who commanded attention just by existing. He wasn't particularly tall or imposing, but he had this presence that made everyone else in the room feel like background characters in his story. His suit probably cost more than most people's cars, but he wore it like it was just another Tuesday uniform. Everything about him screamed, "I have more money than small countries and the power to back it up." But here's the thing that made the whole situation absolutely perfect. Julian Cross was supposed to be in Singapore this week, closing some mega deal that had been splashed across every business publication for the past month. The fact that he was standing in the Green family mansion at my cheating wife's engagement party was like seeing a unicorn riding a dinosaur through downtown Denver. Charles looked like he was about to have a stroke. His face had gone from its usual smug to a shade of white that matched the marble statues scattered around the mansion. The champagne glass in his hand was shaking so badly, I was surprised he hadn't dropped it yet. "Mr. Cross." Charles managed to stammer, his voice cracking like a 13-year-old boy trying to ask a girl to prom. "I didn't know you were in town." Julian turned toward Charles with the kind of smile that would make a shark jealous. "Charles," he said, his voice carrying easily across the now silent room. "I wouldn't miss this for the world." The crowd was frozen, like someone had hit the pause button on their entitled little lives. These people weren't used to being upstaged at their own parties. And having Julian freaking Cross show up unannounced was like having the president crash your backyard barbecue. Melissa, to her credit, recovered faster than her fiancé. She glided over with that practiced smile she'd perfected during her beauty pageant days, extending her hand like she was greeting royalty. Mr. Cross. What an unexpected pleasure. I'm Melissa Greenblake, soon to be Melissa Mercer. I understand, Julian said, shaking her hand with the kind of politeness that somehow managed to be insulting. Congratulations on your transition. The way he said transition made it sound like she was discussing a career change rather than abandoning her marriage. And I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing out loud. But Julian wasn't done. He turned back to me and extended his hand. And when he spoke, his voice carried across the silent room like he was addressing a corporate board meeting. Adrian, he said, shaking my hand firmly enough for everyone to see. I'm glad you're here. We have much to celebrate. The collective gasp from the crowd was audible. These people had been treating me like a leper for the past hour, and now the most powerful man in healthcare was greeting me like we were old friends. The sudden shift in social dynamics was so dramatic I could practically hear their brains short-circuiting. Harold Green pushed through the crowd, his face flushed with the kind of panic that comes from realizing you might have seriously miscalculated. Mr. Cross, sir, this is such an honor. I'm Harold Green, Melissa's father. If we'd known you were coming, we would have. Would have what? Julian interrupted, his tone polite, but sharp enough to cut glass. Treated your son-in-law with more respect. The silence that followed was so complete, you could have performed surgery in it. Harold's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, while Patricia clutched her pearls so hard I was surprised the string didn't snap. Julian continued, his voice never losing the conversational tone that somehow made every word hit like a sledgehammer. You see, Adrian here isn't just a guest at this party. He's my business partner. The contract we signed last week, the one worth $25 million. That's just the beginning. $25 million. He'd said it loud enough for the entire room to hear, and the effect was immediate. The crowd started whispering frantically, the sound building like a swarm of particularly gossipy bees. These people live for this kind of drama, and Julian had just served them a 5-course meal. Charles looked like he was going to vomit. His face had gone from white to green and he was swaying slightly like someone had hit him with a baseball bat. $25 million. He managed to croak. Initial investment. Julian confirmed with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather. Adrian's logistics AI will revolutionize healthcare supply chain management across North America. We're projecting a market impact in the billions. Billions with AB. The crowd was eating this up. Their attention shifting from Charles and Melissa to me like I'd suddenly become the most interesting person in the room, which, let's be honest, I had. Melissa's smile was starting to crack around the edges. She'd gone from glowing bride to be a deer in headlights faster than her father's Bentley could go from 0 to 60. Adrienne never mentioned any contract, she said, her voice tight with forced cheer. Probably because he's modest, Julian replied. And I swear I saw him wink at me. Unlike some people, Adrian doesn't feel the need to announce his success to everyone with an earshot. The dig at Charles was so obvious, it might as well have come with neon signs, and the crowd definitely caught it. A few people were actually smirking now, the social tide turning faster than a politician's campaign promises. Patricia Green, who'd been standing frozen like a statue for the past 5 minutes, suddenly found her voice. Mr. Cross, surely there's been some mistake. Adrienne was just fired from Harrison Tech. He's living in some terrible apartment. By choice, Julian cut her off smoothly. Sometimes the most successful people prefer to fly under the radar while they're building empires. Adrian's apartment is temporary. His success, however, is permanent. That's when Charles finally found his voice again, though it came out as more of a whimper than the commanding tone he'd been using earlier. But the Harrison Tech contract we were supposed to license his technology through our partnership with, were you? Julian's eyebrows rose in mock surprise. How interesting. Because last I checked, Adrian owns that technology outright. Any licensing deals would have to go through him directly. The implications hit Charles like a freight train. His mouth fell open as he realized that not only had he lost Adrian's technology when he fired him, but now his former employee was working directly with the one company Harrison Tech had been desperately trying to partner with. In fact, Julian continued, clearly enjoying himself now. Adrian and I were just discussing the possibility of expanding our partnership. We're always looking for innovative companies to work with, though we're quite selective about our partners' character and business practices. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Julian Cross could make or break companies with a phone call, and he just basically announced that Harrison Tech was on his list. The crowd was in full whisper mode now, the sound building like a gathering storm. These people could smell blood in the water, and the sharks were starting to circle. Charles and Melissa had gone from the evening's golden couple to social paras in the span of about 10 minutes. Julian checked his watch, probably a Rolex that cost more than most people's houses, and turned back to me. Adrian, shall we discuss those expansion plans? I believe we have an early morning meeting scheduled. Of course, I said, finding my voice for the first time since he'd arrived. Lead the way. As we walked toward the exit, Julian's voice carried back to the stunned crowd one final time. Enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone. I'm sure it will be memorable. The last thing I saw before we left was Charles standing frozen in the middle of the room, still holding his champagne glass, looking like a man who just watched his entire world collapse in real time. You know what they say about revenge being a dish best served cold? Well, apparently nobody told Sophia Daniels that because the woman was serving it up piping hot with a side of, let's destroy these bastards completely. It was Monday morning, exactly 48 hours after Julian Cross had basically nuked Charles and Melissa's engagement party from orbit, and I was sitting in Victor Hale's law office, feeling like I'd been cast in some kind of legal thriller, where I was simultaneously the victim and the guy plotting the takedown. Victor's office was exactly what you'd expect from Denver's most ruthless corporate attorney. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, leather furniture that probably cost more than my Honda, and law books arranged with the kind of precision that suggested he actually read them instead of just using them for decoration. The man himself looked like he'd been designed in a laboratory specifically for intimidating opposing counsel. Sharp suit, sharper eyes, and the kind of smile that made you want to check your wallet afterward. Adrian, he said, settling behind his massive desk like a general preparing for war. Sophia has filled me in on the basics, but I need details. Every dirty little secret, every questionable business decision, every time Charles Mercer, so much as jaywalked, we're going to turn these people inside out. That's when Sophia pulled out her laptop and cracked her knuckles like a pianist preparing for Carnegie Hall. Oh, Victor, she said with that predatory grin I remembered from our college days. You're going to love this. For the next 3 hours, I watched Sophia work her magic. And let me tell you, the woman was an artist.